All right, here you go.
Okay.
Hey, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, guys. Hello. Hi. Happy Monday. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks, Frantic, and this is wonderful, and thank you, Sammy and Thomas, for great talk. I couldn't have said some of those things better myself. So I'm tremendously excited to be here in your country. It's my first time here and in your beautiful city. When I first learned about your city was a long time ago using some software called Microsoft Encarta back in the early 90s. And I've always wanted to come here because my brother and sister and I would travel around the maps and we would click the names of the cities to hear the pronunciation. So we had you hear that? And we just thought Helsinki was like we would just be rolling laughing because he was like pitch shifted down, maybe even more than that. So we just repeat it over and over again, like Helsinki, 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 Helsinki. So very excited to be here. Needless to say, I told my brother and sister I was coming over. They were, yes, you're going to Helsinki. So yeah. Anyways, responsive web design. That's what we're really here to talk about. So responsive web design is certainly a thing. Began its life. This term, responsive web design. This term created by Ethan Marcotte, who's a web designer based in Boston, began its life as this article for A List Apart. Subsequently became a book, right? Really, I'm sure a lot of you have read it. Later on this year, the movie is coming out, Responsive Design, the movie. I'm so excited. So Ethan defined responsive design as these three core ingredients, these three tenets of responsive design. Fluid grids, right? We're not making these fixed width container sites anymore. We're making these sort of nice flexible foundations. Now that we have these flexible layouts, we need the media inside of them, right? Or images or videos and things like that to be squishy as well, for lack of a better word. And then we have these media queries, right? And so these media queries allow us to write layout rules and apply certain CSS styles based on whenever certain conditions are true. And so these are the three ingredients. And this is what a lot of people have been focusing on ever since responsive web design has come out, right? You could make these squishy websites, you could get a raise, impress your boss, right? It's these three things, three web development techniques, right? Front-end web developers, pay attention to this. Everyone else could just sort of carry on as they always have. But this is actually the problem. Because Ethan did such an effective job defining responsive design as these sort of three core ingredients, a lot of people have sort of just taken it at face value. And we've been creating these squishy sites and things like that. But of course, on the other hand, people who think there might be more to it, there's a little skeptical about responsive design because, oh really, all we need to do is these three things in order to create a great multi-device web experience. And well, as it turns out, really, while responsive design is important, right? It deals specifically with layout, right? And it's really part of a broader adaptive web design strategy, as Sammy and Thomas mentioned earlier, right? Where responsive design is the layout part of it are really sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? These front-end web development techniques. But actually, there's so many other things, right? As we plunge beneath the waterline that matter, right? In order to create a truly effective multi-device web experience, right, we have to take these things into consideration. And that sort of takes it from this front-end web development technique that it's like, oh yeah, you developers just go away and make some squishy websites to something that's far more powerful, far more transformative. And so that's where we're at. And the last talk did a wonderful job sort of talking about some of those things. But really this idea of crafting a great multi-device web experience goes beyond, just sort of taking your legacy desktop site, right, your client's legacy sites, and figuring out how to cram all this crap down into these smaller screens, right? It is about starting at the other end of the spectrum, right? Starting with those constraints of mobile, right? Starting with those constraints, not assuming anything out of the gate, right? Assume small screen first. Assume slow connection first. Assume clunky touch or D-pad even input first, right? And solve for your problems there, right? Solve those business cases, solve those user use cases and things like that at that very foundational level. And then in doing that, in focusing and stripping out all the extra bullshit that you're tempted to put in whenever you have so much screen real estate, right? What you're doing is creating this lean, mean, again, like more likely to be highly performant experience. And as screen space increases, as device capabilities and browser capabilities increase, we now have this white space, this wiggle room, this opportunity to sort of progressively enhance our experience, to take advantage of all of those wonderful contextual things that the previous speakers mentioned. So that's sort of the basic gist of sort of adaptive design, as we say it in a broader sense, without getting too much into detail. But so in order to do this, in order to really sort of hone in on what sort of matters, we sort of have to take a step back from this 2 millennia year-old term, this idea of the page. Once upon a time there were these things called books. I don't know if you guys do you have those over here? I don't know. But yeah, they're heavy and awkward, and they consist of these pages, right? And these pages, and they give you paper cuts whenever you turn the page. They're awful things. I'm glad they're no longer around. But this idea of the page, right, has been baked into the very nature of the web, right? We talk about, how heavy our web pages are, right? Our clients, our SOWs, our proposals, they're all like, oh, we need this many pages. Brad, hey, how long is the home page going to take you to make, right? We speak in terms of pages, but in fact, this just doesn't make sense anymore, right? Because this is our reality, right? Sort of a humbling image, if you will. It sort of makes you want to go be a farmer. Right? It's like, nope, no, nope, that's not my, yes, this is our jobs, ladies and gentlemen. This is what our job entails, is creating for this plethora of devices. And so this ain't going to cut it, right? Okay, well, we need to show what our web page looks like on a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air or an iMac, right? It's always one of those, right? And an iPad and an iPhone. And we will tilt them slightly, right? Ooh, impress the clients. Ooh, wow, that was sexy, right? So this is just a tremendous waste of time. This is what I would say is a tremendous waste of a talented designer's time. So we quite literally have to blow it up, right? Blow up this idea, but also quite literally blow up our interface, right? I've spent a lot of time sort of pondering this question, right? What are our interfaces made of? What are our Lego bricks? What are our sort of Subway sandwich pieces that we arrange in millions of different delicious configurations, right? What are our basic ingredients? And I've been working on a site called This Is Responsive, which is a sort of a collection of design patterns for creating things for the multi-device web. And so it's all about sort of deconstructing our interfaces into these systems rather than pages, right? People like Andy Clark have been speaking about this for quite some years now. And while it's been spoken about for years now, it matters more and more every day because, let's face it, the reality is this responsive design thing ain't all that easy, right? Anybody familiar with Foundation? Anybody using this? Yeah, raise a show of hands. Okay, so yeah. How about our good friend Bootstrap? Yeah, okay. I'm not judging you. um, I am. No, just kidding. No, I think that these things are great. Like, so this idea, these things are these responsive toolkits, these UI toolkits, and I think that they're phenomenal for quickly articulating an idea, putting together a quick prototype, and sort of demonstrating how something's going to react in different browsers and environments. I think that they're amazing, right? And it's conceptually, I think that they're great. But this is my problem with them. Look at these happy people. they're just having the time of their lives. But yes, as I would watch sci-fi movies and TV shows as a kid, I guess I couldn't shake the thought. I'm like, I guess if just given enough time, we just solve fashion. We're just like jumpsuits. Like, that's it, We don't need to do fashion anymore. Just fashion check, right? Let's move on to music next. It's just sort of not how we as human beings work, right? We all have different tastes and styles and needs and goals and all of this stuff. So why in the world, right, do we try to sort of pigeonhole everyone into these sort of one-size-fits-all solutions, which leads to everybody looking the same, right? If Nike, Adidas, Puma were to all use Bootstrap in their new sites designs, they would look substantially similar, right? And that's sort of not what they're going for, right? And if they don't look similar, it's because they've fought very hard to overcome, right, the default sort of aesthetics and stuff that we're given them. So these frameworks also give you a lot, and that's great, but sometimes they give you too much, and then the user ends up having to download all of this extra stuff that you might not be using. On the flip side of that, they might not go far enough, and you find yourself having to write a bunch of custom stuff anyways, right? How do you roll these in with your existing infrastructure, your existing site? And then also, you have to subscribe to how someone else has named their stuff. And for me, in my experience talking with a lot of web developers, like that's a pretty big deal, Class equals Jumbotron just sort of feels a little weird to me. I don't know, but maybe that's just me, right? So, but again, conceptually, these things are wonderful. So Dave Rupert, who is a web developer based in Austin, Texas, they worked with Microsoft.com on their big responsive redesign. And what Dave summed up is that, what he said is that we need to treat responsible deliverables like these fully functioning Twitter Bootstrap style systems that are custom tailored for our clients' needs. And I think that just absolutely sums up sort of the direction we need to be going, right? So it's not about everyone using the same tool, but it has everything to do with establishing these sound design systems for your clients. So that's what's given rise to a lot of these front-end style guides and pattern libraries. And Anna Debenham is very much the authority on this, and she wrote a phenomenal book. It's like, I want to say like $2 or $3 to buy, and it'll take a couple hours of your time, and short little book, and I highly recommend it. But in the book, what she talks about is all the many benefits of establishing these front-end style guides, right? You're promoting consistency and cohesion, right? You're making things easier to test by being able to sort of hone in on exactly one pattern that might be causing problems, right? Establishes a better workflow between you and your team. You're creating this shared vocabulary. Everyone's sort of speaking the same language across disciplines. And it becomes this useful reference to keep coming back to. And as Sammy mentioned earlier, what it's doing is sort of establishing this sound design system, not to throw away in 3 years, right? But to really establish something for your organizations, your clients' organizations, and products and services to grow with for years to come. Because let's face it, every time you do that 3-year cycle redesign, well, guess what? You still have forms, you still have tabs, you still have different image types and stuff, and those aren't going to go away. So why in the world do we just sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and just sort of start from scratch every 3 years? So that's the idea, and there's a lot of tools that have been coming out. This one's from Brett Jankard. It's a free open source style guide boilerplate is what he calls it. Jeremy Keith has one called Pattern Primer, stitches together all your different design patterns. Paul Robert Lloyd took one and took it a step further called Bare Bones. And if you crack open the hood on these, in Bare Bones at least, is, here's our header. Here's our paragraphs. Here's our small text. Here's a horizontal list of links. Here's a vertical list of links, right? Here's what our forms look like, right? Things like that, and that's sort of what we're getting at with these style guides. And increasingly, we've been seeing a number of these being released into the wild. This is Anna's work for Code for America, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I highly encourage you guys to check this out. Just establishing all their interfaces patterns. MailChimp released theirs as well. Yelp released theirs, made a reference to atomic design, right? But it all really started with Starbucks. Starbucks went responsive 2.5 years ago or something like that. And whenever they released their site, they also published their pattern library. When you crack open the hood of this thing, you see things like this, right? They're calling this pattern blocks 3 up, and it's this, pretty basic pattern, and you're able to resize the browser and sort of see how it reacts in different screen sizes, right? But this is something that they're using over and over and over again throughout their site, right? They're calling this a featured list, right? With a little thumbnail, a title, and an excerpt. Pretty common pattern. They're using it a bunch of different places on the site. Here's what their data tables look like. Here's one that is, quite simple and will squish quite nicely on smaller screens, but then here's one that has a lot more going on, and they show how they work that out for small screens. So I love these. I think that absolutely this is the type of mentality people should be having when crafting a website in 2014 and beyond. But here's the problem, right? I don't know about you guys, but I don't go into work and go, wonder what I'm gonna do today. Anybody? Anybody bored and have an abundance of extra time at their job? I didn't think so. But yeah, so these things are really time consuming to create. So it's like, oh, well, this would be nice, but we don't have the time or the budget, right, for this. And very often these things are treated as separate projects altogether, right? Some organizations have like a dedicated team for these kind of things, which not everyone has the luxury of doing. Oftentimes they're too abstract, right? You just sort of, it's nice to see these patterns, but at the same time, you don't really get a sense of how they fit in, right? How do these things actually get utilized in the final interface? Oftentimes they're only seen as a developer tool or designer tool, or one or the other, or even if it is both of them, it's not shared with the clients, it's not shared with the project managers and things like that. I think that's a shame. Oftentimes you launch a site and you cherry pick patterns after the fact, right? It's like, oh, I guess we'll go through if we have time to and sort of pick things out. Oftentimes they're only serving present use cases, right? Well, what happens? Your client might not be doing a lot of video work right now, right? But then next year, video becomes a really big initiative for them. Wouldn't it be great to establish a system that has sort of anticipated that and sort of solved for that ahead of time?